Hey, so hello from South Korea. I wanted to share a few insights on this idea of present value versus future value. What do those things actually mean, and how can you empower yourself to really do well on your exam on, if I'm not mistaken, May 28th? So there are four things that I'd like to do right now, and we're going to break them down. So the first thing will be context to give you a better sense of what present value is and what future value is. Two is going to be to define the present value. Three would be to define the future value. And then four would be to kind of give you a better sense of the key factor, which is the discount rate or the compounding rate, and what it means. All right, so let's begin with the first section. This idea of context. And this idea of context will give us a better perspective on what the present value is and what the future value is. So let me give you a story. Let's say I could give you $100,000 today or $1,000,000 50 years from now. What would you want? What would you rather get right now, right? Or 50 years from now? Take like 2 seconds to think about it. 100K today or $1,000,000 50 years from now? Well, this answer is definitely subjective, but typically most of us should say $100,000 today for various reasons, right? We're in our 20s or in our late teens. We could do a lot with 100K. We could buy a brand new Porsche. We could put that as a down payment on a house, or we could invest it in an index fund or the stock market and let that grow for 50 years. And, truth be told, if you do so for 50 years, you're probably going to be having much more money than just $1,000,000. All right. So just intuitively, we know that 100K today is worth much more than us today than $1,000,000 50 years from now. Right. $1,000,000 50 years from now is really, really far away. We may die, before then. We may make more money such that $1,000,000 is not as valuable. And also, remember, if you're 20 now, you'll be 70 when you have $1,000,000. Will that $1,000,000 be as valuable to you? Probably not. So already there, what I'm trying to say with this first bucket is that time definitely plays a role with our relationship to money. And thus comes the idea of the time value of money. Relative to time, what will be the value of X amount of money, right? How can we make sense of that? And that's where we get this idea of present value versus future value. Okay, so that's really what I want to let you kind of understand. We don't just do this because it's like fairy dust or magic. There really does seem to be a relationship between our vis-a-vis money and time. All right, so with that said, let's begin this idea of present value. This idea of present value is really understanding, well, how much will X amount of money be worth today if it's expected to be received at, period Y. So for example, if we know we are going to receive 100K today, the present value of 100K today will obviously be 100 grand, right? Because we know that 100 grand will be worth 100 grand if it's received today. There's no play with time, right? However, if I said in this case, well, what would be the present value of that $1,000,000 we've discussed that you're expected to receive in 50 years? What would be a good trade-off for you? What would be like the amount that you would expect for $1,000,000 50 years from now? In other words, we need to use a discount rate. That we'll talk about later. But this idea is that we know we have $1,000,000 50 years from now, and we're going to try to figure out what is the present value of that today. Luckily for you, there are formulas that we could use that are super easy, and this definitely does relate to this idea of discounting something, but that we'll look at it a little bit more. This idea of present value, once again, is understanding how much will X amount be worth today if it was received at another time, okay? Now, if we go into the third bucket is about this idea of future value. Now we're trying to understand, well, how much will X be worth in Y amount of time? So if I have $100,000 today and I'm investing it, well, how much would that be worth 10 years from now? What will be the literal future value of my money? What will my money be worth in the future? Really simple idea. This relates to the concept of compounding interest. Okay, it's very, very interesting. It's no pun intended. It's the interest rate. So with that, there's also a formula that we may need to use, and that's going to give us a better sense of what to do. So this is a quick and easy introduction to this concept of present value and future value. Hopefully the story gave you a little bit more context. The fourth bucket, however, that we want to look at is this idea of, well, how do we find the present value? How do we find the future value? Well, this is really simple. We're going to divide these once again into two buckets. The present value and the future value. And obviously we're going to figure out how we find them. So if we begin with the present value, in order to find the present value, we need to use what we call a discount rate. Sometimes we could call this an opportunity cost. The discount rate, really what it allows us to do is to understand the following. Let's say that you could invest your money, in the stock market. And you could invest your money in the stock market and you could expect to receive 10% per year. If you know that you could receive 10% per year, well, what we could do now is we could kind of assess your opportunity cost. It goes back to our concept of 100K versus $1 million. If you know you're going to receive $1 million 50 years from now versus 100K today, but you know that you could invest your money in the stock market or in bonds or whatever at 10% per year, then you could do some really quick and clever math. You could say, well, if I have 100K today, all right, I'm even going to write it down here. I don't know if my camera is going to flip, but let's think about it. If you have, I'll write it down, then I'll talk and then I'll show you the paper. But if you have 100K today and you could expect to make 10% per year, and you're comparing this to the option of gaining $1 million in 50 years, all you could do is you could use the following formula. And sorry if you need to twist your head to look at what I wrote on paper, but maybe it'll make sense. So if you look at this right here, I don't know if it's going to work, but hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The idea is that you have 100 grand, 1.10, so 1 plus 10% over 50 years. This right here is your 50 years. This is the formula you're going to use to find the future value, So at the same time, we're kind of looking at the discount rate and we're kind of looking at, the interest rate because we're trying to assess this idea of opportunity cost. So to go back at what I said, if you could invest 100 grand, at 10% per year, and you know that you're comparing that to your $1 million that you could receive in 50 years, well, you probably get to a much bigger amount. And I'm pretty sure if I could do some quick mental math, you'll be at around 11 or $12 million, So obviously, 100K today, which your discount rate, which your interest rate is much more worth it than $1 million 50 years from now, right? So what we did here to figure that out is we actually used compound interest. We looked at the amount we expect today, multiplied by 10% over 50 years, and that gave us our amount. But by that same token, what we could have done, we could have used, as what I discussed at first, the first bucket, the discount rate, and we could have done $1 million divided by 1 plus 0.1, so 10%, to the power of 50, and that would give us the present value of our $1 million we're expecting to receive in 50 years. Obviously, these are things that I cover much more in our crash courses, in our weeklies, so I kind of just really sit down with you and get a sense of where we're at, right? This is just a quick video to give you something free that could help you out. So that's the idea here, And to summarize this, so we have 4 things that we looked at today. This idea of the context, the story. Would you rather $1 million 50 years from now or 100K today? It seems that 100K today, with the current market in general, whatever amount you want to look at, could be a better idea because money, its value changes relative to time. Then we looked at present value. The present value essentially is how much is X worth today if it's expected to be received at Y time, So how much is money worth in the future, that you're going to get in the future, worth today? Then if we look at the future value, we're trying to look at the money that you have now or at set time, how much will that be worth in the future? You're trying to find the future value of your money. Simple like that. And then the fourth bucket was really trying to add some color to this idea of compound interest and this idea of the discount rate. Both of these concepts are literally the same thing. It's the same percentage, the same little figure, but we could use it in 2 different ways. We could use it to find the future value, and we could also use it to discount an amount to find the present value. Now, what I would want you to do, and I'll also look at it in the next video, but I would like you to kind of, check out the formula sheet, check out the course pack. There's so much information on this. So I hope this helped you out. Posting more videos in a bit.